The conference room smelled like furniture polish and coffee no one had touched. Rebecca sat across from me with her hands folded on the table, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light. The attorney had stepped out to take a call, and in the silence, my daughter looked at me with that expression I had learned to recognize over the past 18 months. Patient, concerned, the face you wear when you think someone needs protecting from bad news they cannot quite understand. "Dad," she said, her voice soft, "I know this is hard to hear, but the portfolio took another hit. The advisor says we should consider liquidating what's left before it gets worse." I nodded slowly and looked past her shoulder at the framed diplomas on the wall. Securities law, estate planning. The attorney had good credentials. Rebecca had chosen him herself. "How much is left?" I asked. "Maybe 40,000. I'm so sorry. I know you trusted me with this." The funny thing about betrayal is how quiet it sounds in the moment. No thunder, no dramatic music, just a number spoken in a sympathetic tone in a room that smelled like lemon oil. I had spent 37 years as a civil engineer. Not glamorous work, but steady. I had designed water treatment systems and inspected bridge foundations and signed off on structural calculations that kept people safe. My wife Helen used to joke that I approached everything like a load-bearing problem. Figure out the forces, check the math twice, build in margins for error. She died 6 years ago, and I missed her most in moments like this, when I needed her gift for reading people. Helen would have seen through Rebecca years before I did. After Helen passed, Rebecca insisted on helping me modernize my finances. She worked in wealth management, after all. Had the credentials, the connections, the vocabulary I never bothered learning. She spoke about diversification and liquidity, like I spoke about hydraulic gradients and soil compression. I was 63 then, tired from decades of 12-hour days, and still raw from losing my wife. When Rebecca offered to take over, it felt like relief. I signed the papers she brought, gave her power of attorney over the investment accounts while keeping my pension and the house in my name alone. She promised to call every month with updates. For the first year she did. The returns looked modest but reasonable. 7% here, 5% there. Nothing that raised flags. I had started with $800,000, money Helen and I had saved through careful decades. It was supposed to be enough to last. Then the calls became less frequent. The statements arrived later, with increasingly technical explanations for disappointing numbers. Market volatility, sector rotation, correction cycles. Rebecca always delivered bad news with the same expression of shared disappointment, as if we were both victims of forces beyond anyone's control. But 3 weeks ago, I had received a piece of mail that was not supposed to come to my house. A proxy voting notice from a brokerage I did not recognize, addressed to me, regarding shares I did not remember owning. When I called the number on the letterhead, the representative confirmed I had an account there. Current balance, $647,000. I did not tell Rebecca about the call. I thanked the representative and hung up. Then I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum, reconstructing the architecture of what my daughter had built. That night, I began pulling documents from the file cabinet in my basement. Every statement Rebecca had given me over the past 4 years, organized chronologically in accordion folders, because that was how I organized everything. I spread them across the ping-pong table Helen and I had bought when Rebecca was 10, back when she still wanted to spend time in this house. The statements formed a pattern. Consistent losses, quarter after quarter, gradually depleting the portfolio she claimed to manage. But the proxy notice revealed a parallel structure. Money that should have been disappearing was simply elsewhere, in accounts she had opened in my name but never mentioned. She had been moving my assets sideways, not down. I worked through the night, cross-referencing account numbers and transaction dates. By dawn, I had a timeline. Rebecca had opened the undisclosed accounts 18 months ago, around the time her husband lost his job. She had been transferring money in increments small enough to escape immediate notice, then generating false statements showing investment losses. The money was never gone. She had just convinced me it was. Helen used to say that anger was a luxury we could not afford during the years we were building everything from scratch. Better to channel that energy into solving the problem. I felt her absence sharply as I sat alone in the basement, surrounded by evidence of our daughter's deception. But I heard her voice clearly. What do you do with a structural failure? You stabilize what remains and prevent further collapse. I made coffee and started a new list. The first call went to my own attorney, a man named Gerald, whom I had worked with when Helen and I drafted our wills 20 years ago. He listened without interrupting as I explained what I had found. Gerald had a dry, methodical way of speaking that reminded me why I had hired him in the first place. You'll need forensic documentation, he said. Certified statements from all institutions involved. I'll draft a revocation of the power of attorney effective immediately. We should also discuss moving assets into a trust structure she can't access. How long will that take? 2 weeks if we move efficiently. Can you avoid alerting her during that window? Yes, I said. I could avoid many things when necessary. The second call went to the brokerage where my hidden money sat. I requested full documentation of every transaction since the account opened. The representative said it would take 5 business days. I thanked her and made a note on my calendar. The third call was harder. I dialed Rebecca's number and got her voicemail. Lately, I often got her voicemail. Rebecca, it's Dad. Just checking in. Call me when you have a minute. She called back that evening while I was eating dinner. Chicken and rice, the meal I had been making 3 times a week since Helen stopped being there to insist on vegetables. Hey, Dad. Sorry I missed you earlier. Crazy day. I won't keep you, I said. I was wondering if we could meet next week. Go over the portfolio again. I want to understand where things stand. A pause. Of course. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I just like to stay informed. Absolutely. I'll check my calendar and send you some times. Her voice carried that careful brightness people use when they are pretending everything is normal. I recognized it because I was using it too. The statements arrived from the brokerage on a Thursday. 22 pages documenting every deposit, every transfer, every transaction that built the hidden account. I read them twice, making notes in the margins with the mechanical pencil I had been using since 1987. Helen bought me a box of them for Christmas that year. I was down to the last 3. Gerald filed the revocation of power of attorney on Monday. By law, Rebecca would receive notice within 48 hours. I spent those hours preparing for her response, running through scenarios the way I used to run structural calculations. She would call, she would be concerned, maybe hurt, she would ask why. I needed to stay calm and offer nothing. She called on Wednesday morning, earlier than I expected. Dad, I got a letter from some attorney's office saying my power of attorney was revoked. What's going on? Are you okay? I'm fine, Rebecca. Then why would you do this without talking to me? Did someone tell you to do this? Her voice had an edge I had not heard before. Not anger, exactly, something sharper. I'm just simplifying some things, I said. It's not personal. Not personal? Dad, I've been managing your money for 4 years. I've spent hours every month trying to salvage what's left after the market destroyed your portfolio. And you revoke my authority without even telling me? I let the silence stretch. Helen taught me that silence made people fill space, and what they chose to fill it with told you everything. I need to know if someone's influencing you, Rebecca continued, because this doesn't sound like you. No one's influencing me. Then why? Like I said, Simplifying. She made a sound that could have been frustration or disbelief. Fine, if that's how you want it. But you're making a mistake, Dad. You don't understand these markets like I do. Maybe so, I said. Take care, Rebecca. I hung up before she could respond. My hand was steady. That surprised me. Gerald called that afternoon to confirm the revocation was official and recognized by all relevant institutions. We scheduled a meeting for Friday to establish the trust. He suggested a structure that would protect the assets from any claims while allowing me to designate beneficiaries of my choosing. I asked him to prepare the documents. The trust work took 3 meetings and cost more than I wanted to spend, but Gerald was thorough. We created an irrevocable trust funded with everything except my pension and the house. The designated beneficiaries were my sister, Marie, who had driven 8 hours to stay with me the first week after Helen died, and 2 charities Helen had supported, one for literacy programs and one for hospice care. Rebecca's name appeared nowhere in the trust documents. She'll contest this, Gerald said during our final meeting. You should be prepared for that. Let her contest. The documentation is clear. It is. But family litigation gets ugly. Are you certain about this exclusion? I looked at him across his desk. This man who had helped Helen and me plan for a future where we took care of the people we loved. I'm certain, I said. Rebecca tried calling twice more over the following weeks. I let both calls go to voicemail. Her messages were variations on a theme: confusion, concern, an offer to sit down and talk things through. She never mentioned the hidden accounts, never acknowledged what I had found. That told me everything I needed to know about whether she planned to confess. I did not want a confrontation. Confrontations required accusations, denials, the exhausting theater of people defending positions they knew were indefensible. What I wanted was the opposite of drama. I wanted a clean boundary and a future where my daughter could not reach across it. The trust was funded by October. Gerald sent me copies of all final documents, and I filed them in the cabinet next to Helen's death certificate and our old tax returns. Order mattered. Systems mattered. When you built something carefully, it lasted. I started sleeping better after that. Not perfect sleep, but better than the fractured nights I had endured since finding that first proxy notice. There was relief in knowing the problem was contained, the assets protected, the remaining years of my life structured in a way that honored what Helen and I had built together. Rebecca stopped calling entirely by November. I thought about reaching out, crafting some neutral message that might ease the silence without conceding anything. But I never did. Some distances are meant to grow. I turned 70 in February. Marie called and offered to drive up for dinner, but I told her to save the trip. I made chicken and rice and ate it while watching a documentary about the Hoover Dam. Good engineering, that dam. Elegant solutions to massive problems. I admired that. The call from Gerald came on a Tuesday in late April. I wanted to give you advance notice, he said. I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. They're saying 6 months, maybe less. I gripped the phone tighter. Gerald, I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm referring all my clients to a colleague, Elizabeth Chen. She's sharp, and she has all your files. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I appreciate that. There's one other thing. You should update your will to match the trust structure. Make sure there's no ambiguity when the time comes. All right? I mean soon, not eventually. Life doesn't wait for us to be ready. He was dead by July. I went to the funeral and sat in the back. His family looked destroyed in that particular way sudden loss creates, even when the loss is not sudden at all. I thought about Helen, and how her absence had carved spaces in my life that never filled back in. I thought about Rebecca, and how some absences were necessary. Elizabeth Chen called the week after Gerald's funeral to introduce herself and schedule a meeting. She had his same methodical approach, the same preference for clear language over legal performance. We met in September to finalize the updated will. Everything aligned now. Trust, will, beneficiaries. Rebecca would receive nothing. The people who had shown up would receive everything. "Your daughter may challenge this," Elizabeth said, echoing Gerald's earlier warning. Adult children often contest wills when they're excluded, especially if they expected an inheritance. "Let her challenge it," I said. "The documentation will speak for itself." Winter came. I shoveled my driveway myself and felt the strain in my lower back, but finished the job. I was 71 now, slowing in ways I noticed every morning, but still capable. Still here. The call came on a Saturday in March, early enough that I was still drinking my first coffee. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Mr. Harrison?" A woman's voice, professional. "This is Dr. Patel from St. Luke's Hospital. You're listed as the emergency contact for Rebecca Morrison." Everything stopped. "What happened?" "She was brought in last night after a car accident. She's stable now, but she's asking for you." I drove to the hospital with my hands tight on the wheel, my mind refusing to settle on any single thought. The anger I had carried for 2 years felt suddenly distant, replaced by something older and more automatic. She was my daughter. She was hurt. Nothing else seemed to matter in that moment. Rebecca was in a room on the 4th floor, her right leg elevated in a cast, bruises darkening her cheekbone. She looked younger somehow, diminished by the hospital bed and the thin blanket. "Dad," she said when she saw me. Her voice cracked. I pulled the chair close and sat down. "What happened?" "I was driving home late. Someone ran a light. I don't really remember much after that." She looked at her hands. "They said I was lucky." "You were." We sat in silence for a while. The room smelled like antiseptic, and the flowers someone had brought her. Not me. I had not thought to bring flowers. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said finally, "for everything. I know you figured it out. The accounts, the money. I know." I waited. Michael lost his job and we got behind on everything. The mortgage, his car, credit cards. I panicked. I thought I could borrow from your accounts temporarily, pay it back before you noticed. But it kept getting worse and I kept lying, and then I didn't know how to stop. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. I recognized the effort that took. Helen used to say, Rebecca inherited my stubbornness along with my nose. "The money's still there," she continued. "I never spent it. It's just in accounts I moved it to. I can transfer it all back. I will transfer it all back." "I know where the money is," I said quietly. "I've known for almost 2 years." She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the moment she understood. The revoked power of attorney, the silence, the distance. All of it had been deliberate. "You've been planning this," she said, "cutting me out. Protecting what's mine. I'm your daughter. I know what you are." The words came out harder than I intended, but I did not take them back. We sat there, 2 people who used to be close, separated now by a distance neither of us had the tools to cross. "I should go," I said, standing. "I'm glad you're all right." "Dad, please, let me fix this." I paused at the door. "Some things stay broken, Rebecca. You taught me that." I drove home slowly, following the speed limit exactly, my mind cataloging the conversation the way I used to catalog site inspections. Evidence gathered, conclusions drawn. The moment she admitted what she had done, she confirmed everything I had been building toward. There was no going back now. Elizabeth Chen called the following Tuesday. I wanted to inform you that I've received a letter from an attorney representing your daughter. They're requesting a meeting to discuss irregularities in your estate planning. It's a precursor to a challenge. How do you want to handle it? We respond with documentation. Every statement, every transaction, every piece of evidence showing why you made the decisions you made. If she wants to fight this, we bury her in facts. Good, I said. Do that. The meeting never happened. Rebecca's attorney withdrew the request after reviewing our response. Elizabeth called to tell me the challenge was dead before it started. The documentation was too clear, she explained. They couldn't dispute the timeline or the evidence of her mismanagement. Pursuing this would have required her to admit to potential fraud under oath. Her attorney advised against it. I thanked Elizabeth and hung up. The relief I felt was not triumphant. It was simply the absence of dread, the knowledge that what I had built would stand. I died on a Thursday morning in October, 3 years after signing the final trust documents. Heart attack, sudden and massive. The neighbor found me when she came to drop off the mail I had asked her to hold while she thought I was traveling. I was not traveling. I was just tired. The will reading happened 2 weeks later. Marie told me about it later, in the way people tell stories about events they survived. Rebecca came alone. Marie brought her husband. The charity representatives sent their directors of development. Elizabeth Chen presided from the head of the conference table, reading in her clear, unemotional voice. The house went to Marie. The trust funds were split between her, the literacy program, and the hospice charity. My pension survivor benefits, which had continued until my death, were divided among the same 3. Rebecca's name was mentioned only once, in a clause that explicitly stated she was excluded due to documented financial misconduct. Marie said Rebecca sat through the whole reading without speaking. Did not cry, did not object, did not ask questions. When Elizabeth finished, Rebecca stood, gathered her coat, and left. Marie tried to follow her into the parking lot, but Rebecca waved her off and drove away. I imagine her driving alone, processing what she had lost, understanding finally the full consequence of what she had done. I imagine she felt betrayed in her way. People who cross boundaries rarely understand when boundaries are enforced. They expect forgiveness to be automatic, family to mean something more elastic than integrity. But I had spent my whole life building things that lasted. Bridges, water systems, a marriage, a set of values I could look at in the mirror without flinching. Rebecca tried to dismantle what Helen and I had built together, and when she did, she dismantled her place in it too. Marie keeps in touch. She sends cards at Christmas and calls every few months to tell me about her grandchildren, who never knew me but benefit now from the trust I established. The literacy program named a reading room after Helen. The hospice built a garden with a plaque that bears both our names. These were the things we cared about when we were alive, and they continue without us. Rebecca, I am told, is doing well. She reconciled with her husband, who eventually found work again. They sold their house, downsized, rebuilt on a smaller scale. She does not talk about me, according to Marie. Grief and resentment are hard to separate sometimes, and perhaps for Rebecca they are the same thing. I think about her sometimes, in whatever comes after. I think about the version of her that existed before entitlement and panic rewired her into someone who could lie to her father's face for 2 years. I miss that daughter, but I do not regret what I did. Helen used to say that the hardest part of being a parent was letting your children fail when they needed to learn. You want to catch them, to soften every blow, to protect them from the weight of their choices. But protection without accountability is not love. It is cowardice dressed up as care. I let Rebecca believe the money was gone. I let her think she had successfully deceived me. And when the truth came out, I let her face it without rescue or revision. That was the last gift I could give her. Not money, not forgiveness, but the clarity of consequence, delivered without malice, in a voice that stayed calm and exact until the very end. Some structures fail because they are built poorly. Others fail because the ground beneath them shifts. What Rebecca did shifted the ground between us so profoundly that no foundation could have survived it. So I built something new, something that did not include her, and I made sure it would stand. The people who showed up are taken care of. The people who lied are not. The math is simple. The outcome is just. And if there is peace in whatever comes after this life, I found mine in knowing I did not compromise on the things that mattered most. Helen would have understood. She always did.